So next up, we have George, who's going to be speaking to us about applications as libraries, building elm-book and elm-admin. So please join me in welcoming George. Thank you, George.
Thank you. I'll try to stick to the time frame. I'll try. So today we're going to talk about the lessons I learned while building elm-book, while solving a few problems regarding hot module reloading. And one thing that I kind of realized recently while trying to do this other new thing called elm-admin, which probably doesn't have a name because it's probably nothing, but I don't know, I'm calling hidden sides here. Who knows? So basically, what is my personal goal in trying to create libraries for Elm? I feel like Elm gives us a lot of lower level power, and it's kind of like this language mixed with a framework. So a lot of the times I hear people ask oh, can I do this with Elm, or should I do it with React or anything else? And usually they get a response if you want just plug and play some stuff. If you go another route, it's probably faster. But Elm gives you everything, and you can do it there's basically no hiccups. But there's more of doing it yourself, right? So so with great power comes great responsibility, basically, because we have all of these tools at our disposition, but we have to do things ourselves a lot of the times. And I don't want that sometimes, basically, right? Sometimes I just want to get stuff done. I've been making kind of enterprise software for the last 10 years, so I really understand the need to just be productive really fast. So this is what I'm trying to achieve with application as libraries. So it's kind of higher level libraries that take away some of your possibilities, but give you some things while doing that. So you can focus on the core thing that you're trying to do. With elm-book, I try to do just that. With basically if I try to usually frame the use case for the library or something like this. I want to write an interactive documentation thing. Maybe it's for my new cool language or my company's design system. And what can I take away from you that would make it easier to accomplish that goal? And what can I give you in return, right? So for elm-book, I would take away routing and navigation because I just want it to be kind of like a book. And I want to give you the way to just specify some markdown and specify just the widgets that you want to showcase. And that would be it, right? I don't want to think about gluing everything together. I just want to think about showcasing some stuff. And maybe I did end up giving you a model so that you can do the interactive bits of your own book. So there is some kind of utils that I also provide that you can use to do kind of a mini Elm architecture. It was kind of clunky, and it was my actual first Elm application in my whole life. So I ended up doing learning a lot while doing that. This is kind of the gist of it. You write a chapter, right? So you specify kind of a name for your chapter. You give it some components, and then you can render some markdown and kind of mix and match the components that are interactive or not with your markdown. You can just do plain markdown. You can just do plain components. You can do whatever, and it works kind of well. And then you bundle them all together into a book with maybe some chapter grouping, and that's it. It gives you more guardrails than Elm usually gives you. But then, okay, so I'll go into kind of my thought process while creating an Elm book and my actual lessons learned while doing that. So when I first started learning Elm, I learned that, okay, so Elm applications only have the model as a state, right? It's the only place that you can have your state. So I thought about like the application of elm-book as receiving some input from the end user on the init, and I would just like store everything on my state, right? And then becomes like a normal Elm application. So I just like stored everything from the user data, like the chapters that they created, into the model itself. But then it kind of like became a problem usually, and I did not know I had like other options. I got a PR from Gimpleman that it was like kind of like, oh, let's support hot module reloading, and it explained like really quickly. Like I cannot even read it to you here, but like it's just like explain how the hot module reloading worked, and I'll try to explain it in like the worst way that you will hear today, which is basically you get your code and you start your own application. Like your init function creates a module, then you can like just do whatever, right? Like you update your module with your messages and updates, etc. And then you like change some of your code. And I don't know exactly like the heuristics of it, but basically it compares like, can I keep the same model that I have right here in a compatible state with the next code version? And if so, it kind of like maintains the model and exchanges everything else. So Gimpleman, sorry, I don't know the actual like his name, but Gimpleman, he suggested that maybe I should keep everything in a closure, like in the init function itself. So the user code would live in a closure, and then the model could just like be kind of pointing towards it, right? Like I would store keys, not the things itself. So this is kind of like the difference. Here in the right side, the left side, I had the previous model, where I just like place everything that the user gave me inside of like the init function. It became a model, and then I stored it and used it like a regular Elm application. And my second version here, I could like just keep the user stuff in my elm-book scope, the closure itself, and then I would give it as an extra argument to my other functions like the init, update, view, etc. And I could always kind of like mix and match both and have library loading library, right? Like this is probably not that important when you're building something of your own, but it's nice as well to do it like that in some way. Anyway, so this was kind of like my first lesson learned. And so closures can be used to hold information at runtime. Sorry, code is actually state as well in some way. So when you're defining a function, you actually got the chance to use that closure to hold some state that can be used to kind of like build dynamic versions of functions inside that scope as well. So this was kind of like a lesson learned, and it will be used later. So this is kind of like just a second example. So instead of like keeping just a model with everything kind of like held tight, in my model, I would just like have like this active path string here. My chapters would be like in a different structure, and then I could like try to find the active chapter in my view. This kind of like has some caveats, because when I changed my code, I don't actually call the init function multiple times. So I may just as well be kind of like in impossible states. If I refresh, I would not be able to get to that state because the like init update cycle would not get me there, you know. Anyway, and one other thing regarding elm-book, this was kind of like a challenge I faced. And sorry, I usually talk really fast. I feel like in English I don't do that as much, but please warn me if I'm kind of like rapping here. Anyway, so at first I tried to build it in a really kind of dynamic way. So it would be awesome if each chapter could have their own Elm architecture, right? Like model, message, update, even like the HTML type. Like maybe I could use Elm UI or Elm CSS or whatever. But then it kind of like becomes a problem because when I try to mix and match those into a single list, or like I try to make that a cohesive application, then it kind of like messes everything up, right? Like when I make types concrete, I can't mix them anymore, right? I'm just saying this here because it will be important later. Okay, so this was another problem. Elm-admin. This is kind of like the thing that I've been working on right now. It tries to also take some of your power less than elm-book, but gives you something else. What is the use case for elm-admin? I want to write an admin application fast. Basically, like that thing that is super boring, but every company needs. And I want to write it in Elm. So I want to write it focusing only on my APIs, my business models, my entities, and not worry about like blue code at all. Not worrying about like doing the same kind of like form validation like over and over again. So I'm giving you routing navigation with authorization, like routing guards. I can get more into that later. Plug and play forms without like any message passing or anything like that, like lists, tables. But I also wanted to give the user things that like people have asked for from elm-book, which is like a fully enabled Elm application with flags and like my own message updates and comments and like everything that I expect to have on an Elm app, right? So my first draft was kind of like, okay, maybe I can have this resource type where people can just like explain what is a user or a post or anything like that, and I can infer everything else like forms, routes, etc. It didn't quite work because like everything is not standard. Like company wants to do things on their own way. Like, and by companies I mean like myself, my company. So I kind of like threw that idea out, and I like left it for like hanging out there for a few months, and then I kind of like found this version. So the gist of it is kind of like elm-book. You create a page. This page here is kind of like related to a user, so I can say that like I need a param in the user ID path param. It's an ID from a string. Like this ID is kind of like something that we use. I can fetch the user when I first join this page. I have a form, and this is all I need to have like a form with validation and message passing and etc. And with actual like custom types inside a select or anything like that. And then I group them all together using this kind of like entry point, right? And the entry point is kind of like an Elm application, as you are used to. You just give it some pages. And the first thing that you might notice is that like in the page here, I don't explain what path it will be hosted in. I just explain like the parameters that it needs, and then here I kind of like give it a path. And this is kind of like the first takeaway from Elm-admin. If I have the init closure, I can do a lot there. I can like it's kind of like a safe place to derive information, right? For an application. I can do optimizations, I can cache things, and the way that I can access things, I can duplicate information in a safe way in an Elm app. And I can actually also validate everything. So here I can also I can kind of check, okay, is this page in an actual like valid route? And if so, I may not even start my application. I can just like show an error message, kind of like a runtime check of things that I was not able to make it type safe, at least in the easiest way for someone to just go there and do stuff. I try to make kind of like read in the most like English way possible. Okay, so the init closure is this is something that I've learned. Like this is something that you can really use to derive things that you can use later. And this actually makes things easier when you're trying to mix and match your model, which is more dynamic, and your user code, which is also dynamic, but it's kind of like outside the architecture. Okay. Incompatible types. I really wanted to be able to just like in a page, if I'm dealing with users, or if in a form, if I'm dealing with a user form, I wanted to be able to use kind of like specific types. And I didn't want for the users to worry about like specifying a custom type that would kind of like group every single possibility of types that they are using just so that I can use it in a single application. So I wanted to make this possible, right? Like have a page with multiple parameters and mix and match all of them inside a single page. And okay, so how can I actually do that? And this was kind of like, this was what I found as a solution, mix and matching the scoping closure thing that I mentioned before. If I, instead of working with types, I work with functions, I can actually make sure my types are found and resolved inside the function closure itself, but the function can return a single like uniform type that is more compatible with the rest of the application, right? So I can work inside scopes, and each scope has their own unique message bound to their closure. Let me go back here really quickly just to say something here. For instance, like in this update user page, in the form, I'm explaining how to get, I'm specifying a user here, right? And here I say, how can I derive this user from my model? So inside this form scope, I can work with this form type, this user type, and I can actually make sure that it exists, it's validated, and every single other function outside the init, the impossible states is guaranteed to not exist. So my form knows that there is a user there. My onSubmit knows that I actually have a user there as well. And inside form, my form is kind of, it possesses that type. The same here inside the page. I'm specifying that I have a param. I'm validating as an ID param here. And inside my page, this specific page closure, I have a user ID. I could have it wherever here, right? Like I could, if it was a paginated page, I could maybe grab something from the query parameters and make sure that I actually have like a user ID and post ID together or something like that. And all of this kind of happens inside the scope, but then it gets resolved before I actually ended up with the final type of each part of my module. So my form here, you may notice that I have resource here as a type, but my output doesn't have any resource because I'm resolving it inside of the single closure. Same as page. In page, I have params, but the params are not part of the output of my type because I'm explaining how to get the params from other like more generic type, and I'm basically mapping my params in the scope and out of the scope in a safe way, right? And because of that, I can actually have my admin with pages that deal with like different resources, different parameters, and everything is type safe. And for just like closing thoughts, I try to really go full in the Elm application. So instead of like just giving the user like give me some views and I can give you like a single method to change the user state, just give me a full Elm application here with init update subscriptions, and I will know that this message, this model, this update function, init, etc., is from the user, and I can wrap it as a kind of like a submodule. And I'm trying to do it in 2 steps. So if you just like use admin, this will look exactly like an Elm application. But there is also like the superpower version which is like admin with effects, which is basically the same, but instead of like returning commands, you return actions that may wrap commands that you are using, or you can just like send effects that the elm-admin application will understand. So if you want to just like display a notification that like something went wrong when you are trying to fetch something from the server, you can just like do it using some effects that I'm making available. But if you are trying to just like fetch something from the server or anything like that, you just like work with commands as you are used to. I'm thinking about this kind of like a progressive enhancement. So you have 2 different entry points. If you don't want to learn about effects at all, you can just like use elm-admin. That's it. But if you, okay, I wanted to use those superpowers, then like there are extra functions that you can opt in and use them, and just then learn about like effects or whatever, right? And this is kind of like just a closing thought because I really want to work in this higher level landscape in Elm. So I've made elm-book and elm-admin. But as part of this, I'm also making two more libraries. Elm team spec is kind of like a team specification library that you can like. There is kind of like a really type safe like color scheme that you have to fill, and it provides some utilities to exchange between dark and light modes. Uh, so everything else uses this and is already compatible. Elm widgets is kind of like really granular atoms of views that are using Elm team spec underneath. So if you are using the Elm team spec, all of the widgets will already be teamed across by your kind of like global team. And elm-admin and elm-book are using teams. Elm-admin is already using Elm team spec. Elm-book, like next version, will also be using Elm team spec. So with this, if you want, you can just like create a single team for your whole company or something like that, and you get like an admin application, elm-book application, and all of the kind of like standard widgets, all teamed using your company colors as well. So yeah, so this is what I've been working on. Except from elm-book, everything is kind of like alpha and breaking every day. It's working, but I'm kind of allowing me to make breaking changes a lot. So they are under the alpha package. But yeah, I hope to have them all available in the next 1 to 2 weeks, maybe. Okay, that would be it, folks.
Great. Please join me in thanking George. Thank you, George. Okay, open floor. Any questions for Josh?
So the part where you were showing how you were you wanted to like group together separate models and messages, but keep it type safe, right? Yeah. I couldn't quite follow what you were saying there, but it's interesting to me because the approach you've done here doesn't look like I've also done something similar, and I did a different approach. At least it doesn't seem like we did the same thing, which surprises me. I didn't realize there were multiple ways to approach this, like keep type safety and have multiple messages, or rather have multiple T architectures combined into one. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, to be completely honest, the T architecture is the thing that I didn't try to choose to have multiple. I feel like it could be possible, but as I wanted to wrap a usual web application inside elm-admin, I'm actually like trying to enforce not having multiple inits and updates and those things.
Okay.
You just have like the single entry point, and you call messages from other places of your app. But at the same time, you do have access to kind of like hidden types of your models and like protected types, basically, right? So inside a single form, you have access to your global model, but you can also kind of like validate part of it or like mix that with some information from the URL or something like that. And then you can have like the more specific part of your page, which only exists when you have that available. And it is type safe in a way that like you are specifying that I need params as a record, not like as a dict of string or something like that, you know?
Oh, is it? So you're giving you have a global model, and then you're providing a getter and a setter, so that you
Kind
can
of.
take a true
Yeah.
slice from it.
Yeah. It's more like I've learned this quite recently, so I'm feeling really smart of saying this word, but it's kind of like applicative in a way that you're defining how you get stuff from somewhere, but at the same time you are requiring someone to specify the type that will result, right? Like it can be a function, but it can also be like a record that gathers all of that data into something that is meaningful.
Okay. You mentioned you were uncertain if it's possible or not to combine multiple T architectures together with type safety. I can tell you it is possible because that's what I did. It was something similar. You mentioned elm-book. I think this is a similar idea that I had to implement for work.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, very cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions for George?
Thanks, folks. And when I release those things, please send me any feedback.
Okay, nice one. Please join me once again in thanking George for his talk. Thank you, George.
Thank you.